Black Mirror is back, y'all, and let's be real, things are looking pretty good for this season. The 7th season of the famous horror sci-fi anthology series was much anticipated, and now that the season is out, we the fans can be the judge of if the wait was worth it or not. And after watching the series, I think the 7th season did an amazing ending/sequel to our Emmy-winning 4th season Black Mirror episode, USS Callister. In case you haven't watched the episode yet, I suggest you do, because we're about to delve deep into spoiler talk. With that being said, let's see how the USS Callister Into Infinity managed to give us a more resonant and uplifting ending after plunging us back into the life of the familiar characters in 2025. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The USS Callister, the beginning of the journey. Since the first episode came out in 2017, I totally understand if you guys have forgotten how the story went. No worries, I got you. In the USS Callister, we meet Robert Daly, played by Jesse Plemons. He's the programming genius with heavy-handed incel tendencies. He has his own video game company with his co-founder Walton, played by Jimmy Simpson. However, Robert felt like neither Walton nor any of his colleagues actually paid him any attention or respect. Now, that's a feeling that I think we can all relate to a degree at least. Workplace drama like that is quite normal. Usually, to deal with workplace emotions like that, we meditate or go to therapy. But not Robert Daly. Instead, he stole the DNA of every workmate he was pissed at and put it through a DNA cloner machine, and created a clone of his workmates only to trap them in his private virtual game world. As you can guess, he doesn't play house with these characters or treat them nicely or with respect. Instead, he sadistically tortures them, punishes them, and of course humiliates them. He turned all of them into his little crew to serve in his spaceship known as the USS Callister, which is modeled after Daly's favorite TV series, Space Fleet. While out in the real world, Daly is the geek. Once he's home, he becomes Captain Daly, the villain version of Captain Kirk, who would literally torture you if you even dared to go against him. Nanette Cole, played by Kristen Milioti, is a quiet coder who Daly decided to put into the game too. However, the clone version of Nanette is not much of a pushover. She refuses to obey Daly, and Daly retaliated by sealing up her face completely, making it hard for her to breathe or speak. If you were to look at Daly as a character, you would realize that he's basically the embodiment of every horror aspect of fandom. Nanette is just as much of a geek or nerd as Daly. In real life, she often admired Daly's work. In the Infinity world, she's also the one who manages to figure out a way to escape the private server they're stuck in. She steered the spaceship full of crew back into the original interface, which is a full multiplayer game after, of course, getting rid of Daly for good. Now, this was a happy enough ending for us, but there's always something more that can be added, right? The USS Callister Into Infinity, the journey continues. In this recent episode, we see Nanette as the captain of the ship. While she managed to permanently banish Daly from this virtual creation of his, and also because Daly is dead in real life, things are not looking good for them. When they were in the server, they had to deal with only one sociopath. But now, there's a whole world of them waiting to shred them to pieces, which are the game's 30 million players. Nanette and crew are forced to practically rob other players in the game so that they can get credits, the in-game currency, to make sure their ship stays afloat. Elena, the blue-skin crew member, played by Miliana Brooks, believes that this highway robbery scheme that they have going for them is nothing but the cost of an existing kind of crisis. The only good thing in their life is watching The Real Housewives of Atlanta. As the crew keeps stealing things from other players, the forum of the game is flooded with complaints about the no gamer tag robbers. Several people complained about it, and the New York Times reporter who showed up to interview about the game brought it up. Walton obviously didn't do a good job of taking care of the matter, and blew up in the reporter's face when the reporter pointed out a DNA cloner in Robert Daly's apartment. He laid out his implications very simply. With the DNA cloner, Robert Daly could have made virtual clones of people, and he could have trapped them in the game, which would be considered a human rights violation, opening up Walton and the whole game company for a series of lawsuits. Walton wasn't having any of it. In the meantime, Nanette, who was the mysterious first responder at Daly's apartment after the crew had blackmailed her into going, was listening in on this conversation. She already had the items that Daly used to extract the DNA from, and after overhearing the whole conversation with the reporter, she began to pull all the pieces together. The people who blackmailed her came from Daly's computer, so definitely there are probably clones in the game. She spoke with Walton about it, and Walton, for a change, decided to work with her instead of making things difficult for her. She gave her access to the entire game as well as Daly's old computer, which he managed to keep with himself. Nanette accessed the codes present in Daly's game, and sure enough, there were clones present. But despite that, Walton and Nanette wanted to confirm if what they were suspecting was actually happening. So using the little nubbings, Nanette and Walton entered the game. As luck would have it, they ended up encountering their clones on a planet. The two pairs of Nanette and Walton go back to the ship, and real-life Nanette is surprised at how capable she seems to be. The differences between the real-life and the virtual clone versions of both Walton and Nanette are so obvious. It begs the question of whether the virtual world versions of both of these characters are true versions of the characters. Can these characters, both Nanette and Walton, be two separate people? Timid versus confident, and asshole versus selfless at the same time? However, we don't get much time to ponder about that because real-life Walton tries to kill them all. The crew manages to survive except Carl, who gets shot in the gut, and Walton goes back into reality. Real-life Nanette leaves the game at the crew's urging, and goes to leave the company building, realizing just how psychotic Walton is. However, she gets hit by a car, and using that as a distraction, real-life Walton returns to the game building with Nanette's backpack, which contains all of her notes and the proof of what Walton had done. In the meantime, in Infinity World, we learn from the cloned version of Walton the grim reality of the game as a whole. Nanette and the crew assumed that they could go to the Heart of Infinity and use some source codes to create their own private server. To gain access to that place, they went after Walton and rescued him from the planet where Nanette met her real-life counterpart. When Walton heard what they were trying to do, he decided to come clean. So the thing is, back in the day, when Walton was a young boy with a huge trust fund, he came across Robert Daly. He heard of his genius and met him in person. Daly showed him the first world he had created, and that led to the beginning of their startup. However, Walton wanted more and more worlds to be built, which Daly wouldn't keep up with. Now, given Walton was a trust fund kid, he'd been throwing away money at a lot of different inventions. The DNA cloner we saw? Yeah, it was one of those inventions that was created out of the porn industry to let everyone live out their deranged fantasies. However, since the tech was legally banned, there wasn't a lot of it lying around. Except Walton had one of them in his trunk. Using that, he cloned Daly and used him as the worker to create the game from scratch. The Heart of Infinity is quite literally nothing but Daly working tirelessly for years in a simulation to create the universe everyone is enjoying. Given the bitter truth, it makes sense why real-life Walton wouldn't like the clones to make their way to the Heart, as the truth would be out. So real-life Walton returns into the game and basically invites every player our crew had robbed so far for sustenance to wherever they were, hoping to spectate their brutal death. Nanette, as the captain, went into the Heart of Infinity, hoping to ask Daly for help, and sure enough, she managed to get the help she needed, or at least the idea of it. The Daly she sees in the simulated Daly's residence is a young Robert Daly with his space fleet shrine. His geeky nature permeated through the screen, and I swear, you could almost smell him. Nanette explained their predicament, and Daly offered that he could either give the crew a private server, or he could send back a virtual Nanette into the body of real-life Nanette, who's brain dead. Captain Nanette chose to save the crew, to which Daly stated that it was all a test like in Space Fleet. He combined the drives, and started working on copying and pasting the details of the crew, but Nanette noticed that it should have been cut and paste and not copy and paste. This is where we see the older Daly that we knew show up in the younger, geekier Daly. Daly didn't want to do cut and paste because then he would be left alone again. He wanted to be with Nanette, which was obviously distressing for her. Nanette tries to explain that it's wrong, and to that, Daly shuts her up by covering her mouth, just like his older version had done. With no other choice, Nanette kills off Daly with his prized blade to the forehead. With Daly's death, the entire game starts to collapse. Right before things got gruesome, Nanette managed to put the right disc into the computer, saving the crew from their certain death in the hands of Pixie, a gamer who had a taste for blood. The disc ended up teleporting both the crew and Nanette back into Nanette's body, bringing her back from the coma. On the other hand, with virtual Daly's death, the kill switch in the game was activated, and the entire Infinity game was wiped out. Nanette anonymously tipped off the New York Times reporter, and Walton got hauled to jail. After such a roller coaster of an episode, you might be wondering something, right? How did Walton survive? In the first episode, we saw Walton turn into Space Crisp. However, in this episode, Carl pointed out that Walton has a room on the spaceship. That should not have been possible, because when the ship reset to leave Daly's universe, it should have spawned rooms only for the living players. But Walton died way before that. Turns out that Walton may have survived if some part of his body got sucked into the wormhole with the ship. That would have been enough to respawn him as a new player in Infinity. Now, the little trick is that the new players do not spawn on the ship, they spawn on planets. So the entire crew worked together to find the planet that spawned when the game was reset. This is what led to the cloned versions of Nanette and Walton meeting the real-life versions of themselves. What will happen to the crew? The reveal that the crew and Nanette are trapped in Nanette's body was a little horrifying at first, but overall, as we fast forward a few months, we see that they have created quite the system for themselves. The crew gives Nanette her privacy in exchange for watching Real Housewives of Atlanta. They ask about how Nanette plans on getting them out of her brain, and while she says that she's working on it, it doesn't seem like she's actually working that hard on it at all. While it may seem like a good enough arrangement for now, having your roommate inside your head is never a good thing. And I have a feeling that this was intentionally kept here to give us sequel bait. Marvelous verdict. In my opinion, I would say the USS Callister Into Infinity definitely brought a lot of depth into the world of USS Callister that we were introduced to. I'm fascinated to see just how marvelously the characters are portrayed. Daly is a villain, but he's also a wretch to be pitied, which is exactly what Nanette does. She pities him. And it's interesting how even though Daly insists that he's not like the bad Daly that Nanette knew, he intended on doing the very same thing that Daly did because he could. The godlike power that Daly had in the universe was not well suited for him. Rather, he was not well suited for the power. And we see that again in this episode. Even though Nanette is not on his private server, we see Daly practically forcing her to do the Space Fleet roleplay when she's given a choice between saving herself and saving the crew. His instant descent into the abusive man we knew him as is just as jarring as I remembered. Furthermore, I love how this episode delved into the whole debate of which life is worthy and which life isn't. We saw Walton trying to kill the clones, all because they were illegal, as they didn't pay the subscription. That hit pretty close to home, didn't it? Overall, I would say that USS Callister Into Infinity was worth the wait. What do you guys think? Do you think it was worth it? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye! And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.